to talk about money, and it's called revenue management. Very, very important part of your business. And revenue management, how it's all changed and the dangers of a quick win. I'd like to welcome on stage another dear friend of mine, Hazel, Rigler, Chief Commercial Officer for Motive Group, and her panellists, Purdon, Director of Market Management, New Zealand and Pacific Islands for Expedia, Stephanie Bickers, Revenue Manager, James Cook Hotel Grand Chancellor and Hotel Grand Chancellor, Auckland City, Kristy Edwards, Director of Revenue Optimisations for BW, Best Western Hotel Group, and Amit, Head of Sales for Asia Pacific for OTA Insights. Let's talk some money. Please welcome. Thank you.
Now to introduce the panel. So we have Amit here, and he has vast revenue management experience collated from his current role at OTA Insight and previous senior revenue roles at Minor Hotel Group, Accor and Hilton, based within Asia Pacific and the Middle East. A fun fact about Amit is his newly acquired skills learnt during many of the lockdowns of baking bread and producing some knockout puddings, much to his family's delight. Stephanie here has been the revenue manager at the James Cook Hotel Grand Chancellor for the past 11 years and Hotel Grand Chancellor Auckland for 5 years, managing the strategy and revenue generation for the hotels throughout earthquake strengthening, renovation programs, as well as driving revenue for Whitby's restaurant. Not hard to believe when you've met him, but Steph's Wheaton Terrier dog Biscuit has over 1,500 followers on Instagram. Very cute. Kristy has been in the accommodation industry for more than 20 years and has a background in operations. Joining BWH Hotel Group 10 years ago as revenue manager, she's now Director of Revenue Optimisation, responsible for revenue and distribution strategies for the hotels in Australia and New Zealand. Kristy loves the dynamic nature of this industry, and there's always something new to learn and ideas to implement to improve the performance of the hotels. And Hayley leads the Expedia Lodging Partner Services for New Zealand, Pacific Islands and Singapore, and is responsible for developing the strategies for the group's accommodation supply business in the region. For the last few years, she has swapped the mountains of Arrowtown for a life in Auckland and is currently navigating the trials and tribulations of sending her son to Victoria University, where budgeting and time management are a huge work in progress. Now, on to the actual questions. Okay, so let's look at one observation in relation to revenue management that's undergone a significant change in the past year. We're going to start with Hayley on this one.
I would say that it's definitely just that kind of mindset shift from what we term as revenue management to performance or revenue performance. And so what I mean by that is, like pre-COVID, we always sort of looked at historical data and we used that a lot to inform our decisions on what to do right now as well as what to do in the future. And we still look at it, but by no way does it really have the weighting that it had pre-COVID. So now we're leaning much more forward into forward-looking data to try and give us that insight to, make decisions now as well as for the future. So yeah, just spending a lot more money, a lot more resources into that insight or that data that can give you that insight more towards that sort of forward thinking. Because it's so hard for us to forecast that, so we need to lean into it.
And we certainly saw that earlier with the STR forward booking data, and for those that are into data as much as we all are here, that data is absolutely gold, I think, in any decision making. Kristy, what's your take on that?
Definitely agree. You can't solely rely on that historical, traditional data that we used to look at, and now we look at a much broader range of data. You need to be looking at sort of global news, global trends, as well as down to a national and more local market level to make predictions and to forecast accurately further in advance. Looking at comparable markets around the world can also help to sort of plan further forward. So Australia's been in a huge demand boom over the last few months, and now New Zealand's coming into that as well. So following those trends, you can sort of, for various regions, track what's moving or what the predicted outcomes are moving forward.
And having that Australian data before New Zealand must be quite handy.
It certainly is.
Stephanie, over to you on this one.
So I would just say the biggest change I've seen is just managing the availability with the availability constraints, and not in a traditional renovation sense where you know exactly how many rooms you've got each night. It's a variable number depending on how many staff we've got, or through different sickness surges, and also just. I look after a reservations team as well, so I might be on the phones or doing emails as much as actually doing the revenue management as well.
Yeah, I think that availability cap thing that we've all been talking about is having a significant impact on actually being able to do revenue management properly, so hopefully we can move past it soon in the coming months. Second question, how have traditional rate tactics performed in this current environment, such as advanced purchase rates, non-refundable rates, pay stay deals, and what are your current revenue strategies beyond discounting? Does 10% really resonate anymore? Amit?
That's an interesting question. So what we've seen, having tracked multiple hotels globally, as well as in New Zealand, I think from a rate tactical perspective, there are three things that really drive this. One is our fence rates or our restrictive rates, which is refundable, non-refundable. The second is our cancellation policies and the movement towards mobile as a discounting strategy as well. So from a non-refundable discounting perspective, what we've seen is that in the past, pre-COVID, we were really aggressive as far as our non-refundable discounting was concerned. And in Auckland, if I look at in January 2020, 80% of the Auckland hotels were driving non-refundable rates. And then COVID happened, and we've moved through that volume focus, and semi-flex rates have kind of come in place as well. So as of June 2022, we've seen that the number of hotels that have dropped from 80%, 55% now are actually selling non-refundable rates, and about 20% are actually selling semi-flex rates. So they're still confident, they still want to drive products, but they don't want to kind of dilute their offering as well. The second is from a cancellation policy perspective, a typical cancellation policy for a hotel was between 0 to 3 days. And that has now changed. So as markets begin to get more buoyant, borders open up, people get more confidence in the demand that's coming in. You've seen in Gold Coast, for instance, just very recently, the percentage of hotels that are now offering that cancellation is between 0 to 7 days as against the typical 0 to 3 days, because they want to be a little bit more aggressive and more confident of their product as well. Mobile discount is, we never really had mobile discounting as a practice as well. So there were very many hotels that traditionally only looked at promotion pricing on desktop. But we've seen in Auckland and Queenstown, for instance, in the last 2 years, mobile discounting as a strategy has almost doubled from 14% in 2020 to almost about 25% plus now of hotels that are actually looking at mobile discounting as a strategy. So that is here to stay because your segmentation has changed. And as people book more and more last minute on mobile, that's an opportunity for us to kind of see that as a strategy as well.
Thanks, Amit. I think that whole non-refundable rate discussion is going to be had for coming forward with what TripAdvisor was saying before around having flexible cancellation policies. So I think that whole scenario is going to be quite interesting to see the evolution. Hayley.
Simple answer is yes. It's still really important to have those basics in place, and having those basics in place consistently is always going to be a winner. I think what's different though is that there's like this layer above, which is thinking about just your rate strategy more holistically. And I feel like there's like 3 buckets that come under that. So the traditional rate strategies would definitely come under demand, and you've always got to look after that, as I said, consistently. The second one I think that we need to focus on is really that traveller experience and traveller value, and truly understanding, what that is and how your property kind of stacks up, underneath that from the time they book to the time they leave your property. And then the third one would really be your value proposition. And I guess post-COVID, or the era that we're in now, truly identifying and assessing, is that value proposition still really impactful to the travellers that you are attracting? And I guess thinking along those lines, it's become very evident that it's not just a one-person role, a traditional revenue manager who looks at that demand and rate and off they go. Like, it's the whole team. It's who's responsible for the guest reviews. It's who's responsible for understanding, if you can change or refine your value proposition. So I think it's just a much wider perspective that we need to focus on.
Totally agree, and having that revenue hat on, no matter what you do within the property, is just so important, I think, and it's always, everyone's delivering customer service, everyone's delivering sales. Over to you, Kristy.
Thank you. Completely agree with what they've been saying. So in terms of a flexible option, over the last couple of years, flexible rates really were what we were promoting. There was no point having a non-refundable offering out there. Now we're starting to put those in place again. We're seeing a decent take-up by the guests in terms of booking non-refundable, slightly discounted rates. They're a bit more secure in their travel plans. But having the option available online so that guests can choose between whether they want that fully flexible rate or not. In terms of what discount is being offered, there's huge demand in the immediate future and right now, so I don't think you really need to be doing significant discounts at all between the rates or doing large discount campaigns or promotions. It's all about actually dynamically pricing for every single room, every single day to make sure that you're getting that value add, but be providing value to the guest through whatever you're offering on that particular day.
Are you thinking they're more value adds than discounting from your end?
I think it doesn't necessarily have to be a value add in terms of in the package, but making sure that your online presence and the whole package of the actual experience at the property is delivering that value proposition to the guest. So, obviously cleaning protocols are really important in terms of in our post-COVID or living with COVID travel scenario. The guest experience, so what facilities you have available at the time, are they open, are they at full capacity, because we all have the staffing constraints, and the reopening of those services like gyms and pools and spas and things like that were often shut down or had reduced hours throughout COVID. So just making sure that's all communicated to the guest and presented to the guests so they know exactly what they're purchasing when they're purchasing a room at the property and the experience at the property.
Yeah, that's great. That's just what you were talking about too, Hayley. Stephanie.
So I definitely think non-refundables starting to get its place back in the market. I have reintroduced it at our properties for in the last couple of months, but the numbers are still really low, and I guess what we don't want to be seeing is people booking and then cancelling. Don't mind if they cancel for a COVID, but perhaps I don't want them to book another promotion at another property at the last minute and be doing that work all over again. The other thing that I have been doing that's worked really well is the stay and save promos. Typically in the Wellington or Auckland market, that'll be a stay 2 nights and save, and the discounts on those have varied throughout the time period, and that might be like 8% or 15%, and sometimes 10% is too much of a discount, but when the rates are already really low, so 8% did really work and got lots of room nights through that. And
could be 7.5, you never know.
Oh, who knows? Yeah, whatever options the platforms will let us. And the other tools I've been using is like the minimum length of stay restrictions, and particularly with this constrained availability, and can we spread check-in and check-outs or servicing of rooms by using the those stay restrictions and get a longer booking, and hopefully get some more revenue with that lower occupancy. Yeah, and so, 10% overall. Maybe it doesn't work in a marketing sense. Maybe if you got an email saying 10% offer, not so popular. But I think once you're in the booking platform and there's a list of hotels to choose from, some of those promotions will help you have a higher ranking on the page, and might be the difference between converting to your property or converting the booking overall.
Great tips, thanks Stephanie. Over to forecasting now. How are you currently forecasting, and what are some practical strategies you've adopted in the current environment, both short-term and long-term? And we're going back to you, Stephanie.
Forecasting's been such a horrible one for the last few years. It's definitely felt like sometimes throwing the dart at the board, but definitely been using, what Kristy mentioned earlier today was just looking at previous days, weeks, or just last month to help determine forecasting in short and long term. Definitely looking at prior years hasn't really been particularly helpful, or finding another month with a similar pattern, or how it fitted in a post-recovery, post-lockdown scenario has definitely helped. And also just using the tools. So, some of these tools that we've got available to us with the Rev Plus or, OTA Insight, showing us when demand is actually changing and when things are moving in the market.
That was a nice plug there.
Yeah.
Subtle.
Thanks.
Kristy.
So Steph pretty much took everything I was going to say. However, it's really still, revenue management is always about the data. It's going back, and now we've really come to realise that we need to look at the data differently, cut it differently, make sure we know actually what we're looking at and understand it. So that you can bring it right down to a very granular level and then build it back up again piece by piece to the picture that you're trying to create. So as Steph said, looking at different patterns historically to compare to what we're looking at now. So rather than just, year on year, month on month, you're looking at different time periods that may be tracking at a similar pace. But then also splitting it down to your different segments and how they're recovering. So how is your corporate market booking now? What's their advanced book window? What's their length of stay? What's their channel that they're booking through? The percentage of the total business, is that the same as it was pre-pandemic levels? Has it decreased, increased? Same with your OTA clients, with your direct business, with leisure, any new segments that you've been able to capture, any that you've been able to lost, and forecasting for those individually as well, so that you can take that all into account.
Market segmentation, it's what you need, right?
Definitely.
Thank you. So on to observations that we'd like to share in terms of customer booking behaviour in a post-COVID era. I'm going to look to Amit and Hayley for this one. So Amit, do you want to kick this one off?
Yeah, from a consumer booking behavior, what we're seeing, we covered in the TripAdvisor presentation just this morning, China was pretty much the number 2 feeder market or the source market for New Zealand. That's now, because of lockdown and because of borders not opening, China is not on the top 5, top 10. So we've got new feeder markets and new source markets coming in. India, Singapore, South Korea have definitely notched up in that top 5 feeder markets for New Zealand. So it's just important now that we know that these have, China and Hong Kong together have taken about a 14% decline as far as top 5 feeder markets are concerned for New Zealand. So knowing that these are the new feeder markets for us, what are we doing to be able to accommodate that? Because they are very different from the Chinese traveler. And when we do want to promote and stimulate these new feeder markets for us into our hotels, marketing dollars is definitely important, but it's also simultaneously important to have a positive ROI where we're spending that marketing dollars. So understand that, are you doing the right promotion or the right campaign to stimulate these and attract them to the hotel? So that's number one. Also, what we've seen, as Kristy just mentioned, our lead times and our booking windows have dramatically changed. So again, with that, be cautious that if corporates are not coming now, don't invest in your GDS or your corporate negotiations right now, but look at it at the far end in Q4, Q1, because that's where corporate is beginning to kind of stimulate and come into your properties as well.
A bit of mix of understanding where your customers are from and what has changed,
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely. And also, I mean, I guess, there's a lot of leakage that's happening from a market segmentation perspective and cannibalization from one hotel or brand to another hotel as well. So your global chains are eating into your 4-star, 3.5-star markets in some shape or form because they're wanting to kind of compensate or mitigate the MICE segments or the crew segments that they were pretty much contracted with. So be very sensitive about that as well, because that then impacts consumer behavior automatically.
Yeah, thanks, Amit. Hayley?
We just recently did a large study on this globally, and honestly, it didn't matter whether you were located in a market that was well through your COVID, recovery or completely different. Like it didn't really matter. Flexibility was by far the key winner. So definitely focusing on flexibility moving forward. But then I guess looking under that and understanding how different segments value that. So whether it's, families, couples, whatever it might be, or even age groups, what is of value to them and is that changing over time? So if we look at something like flexibility, yes, overall for the whole population globally, that was definitely the number one thing that, showed value to them. But if we looked at, I think it was the over 40-year-olds here, it definitely is a really good price and flexibility that was, the most, going to give you the most impact and value for your booking. But for the under 40s, it was completely different. They valued cleanliness as, the top thing, and they wanted to be able to understand that at the beginning of their booking journey. And the second thing, which was really interesting for the under 40s, was the sort of premium benefits and perks. They wanted to know what they were, and they feel special if they do have those. So I guess just understanding the different segments, what they're valuing, and then making sure that whatever your strategy is, you are tapping into a large or cross-section of that so that you're moving with it and just being really agile with what travellers are wanting.
And be aware of when they're 39 and turning 40, is that what you...
Yeah, then you change, you're just looking to save money.
Awesome. Quick wins. Every business wants to recoup losses from the past few years as quickly as possible. What quick wins have you implemented with success, and what are the lessons learned and dangers to be aware of? Kristy, we'll head over to you.
That's actually a tricky one. So I think quick wins over the previous couple of years were probably for those hotels that participated into quarantine or government contracted type business. Certainly it was really life-saving for them throughout the periods of lockdowns and things like that. Dangers of those are obviously the wear and tear on the buildings, any stigma attached, where I think most of them have come out without what we thought was going to be an associated negative stigma. But it's then rebuilding your customer base from, you've essentially been closed to the public for a number of years or months throughout the process, and now you're basically starting from scratch again. So that's the dangers of those. The other one is that not looking at your total revenue strategy. So really needing to focus on where are you aiming for before you decide on participating in any promotions, campaigns, things like that. So what is it that you're hoping to achieve? And what are the positive, negative outcomes that are associated with it? So there's a lot of properties that have engaged with, with, recovery campaigns, discounting, mobile rates, things like that. And you really need to have a look at your market and what your overall recovery looks like and whether those fit into the overall plan.
Thank you. There's probably a bit of that product wear and tear across all properties actually, and there hasn't been a lot of product investment over these past few years. So there's maybe that danger of having some of the non-negotiated business priced quite high, and some of that angle that we have to be a bit aware of as well with pricing. Stephanie.
I think definitely one of the campaigns we did was a voucher sort of campaign that ended up, it could end up being quite successful, which is in one way really good because you get some dollars in the bank, but then if the market changes like it has in Wellington market particularly changed drastically, those prices can be way out of line, and then you still need to honour the voucher from a customer service point of view and commit to it. And also we've found that you might have that deal in the market, but then like last year, lockdown happens, that's unexpected, and then you still don't get the guests to stay with you because they can't or they don't want to for fear of travelling, and then you end up again having to honour it during those peak periods, which is really challenging. Yeah.
I think there's a session on vouchers tomorrow. I'm looking forward to that one. All right, and to close, what would be your one top practical tip to help properties navigate the current environment from an RM perspective? Hayley.
I would say we've heard for a while now, and obviously heard today in a lot of sessions, that everyone's really, resource poor, staff shortages, stressed. There's a lot going on, and it's hard. So just to make our lives easier, it's really simple, just making sure that you get those alerts, automatic alerts, just get them coming into your inbox so that you're not having to think about creating some time for yourself to look at your rates and your rate strategies. Attached to that, I know it was one, but just attached to that is committing to actually looking at them. So whatever it is you're doing at the time and whatever your priorities are, if you can look at those alerts in real time and actually maximise the opportunities in real time, then that's just going to obviously benefit you for the future. It's hard to do, and definitely all the properties that we talk to say it is hard to prioritise with everything else that's going on, but those that do definitely see the benefits down the line.
Great. Amit.
Yeah, same with Hayley. I would say two things. One is, with the short staffing, the role of the revenue manager has changed phenomenally. They are no more a revenue manager, but they are a commercial lead of the property because they touch almost every aspect of generating revenue. So number one is look at your revenue manager because he's a data house of intelligence. And it's also important from a hospitality perspective. We don't work in silos, but collaborate because there's market intelligence, whether it's in the marketing person, in the salesperson, in the e-commerce, or even in the F&B. So I think if you collaborate and then make a decision, it's going to be more positive. The second is, we've been talking about this since the morning, but use data to make those positive decisions and forward-facing data, because historical data is pretty much out of the window. You don't know how demand is evolving, where that new segment is coming from, when is it coming, and for how long is it going to stay with you. So use that data from whatever source it may be to make those positive decisions and justify the tacticals that you're employing at the property.
Great. Stephanie?
So I would just say test the market, whether that be new pricing, new offers, new promotions or packages, whether that be sort of up or down, whatever you need to do. Just keep testing it, review, and then change the strategy if it's working or not. And the second one also was just to use the tools that you've got available to you. So some of the, the OTAs have got really great information in there and insights in their extranets, but there's also lots of paid tools around as well.
Top two tips. Yeah. I love it. And Kristy?
I would say at a property level, embed revenue as a culture across every single team member. So make it a perspective from even your housekeeping staff, your engineering staff, through to the front desk staff. Everybody can be involved in a revenue strategy and come up with suggestions or ideas in terms of cost-saving measures, in how things can be utilised differently, and how revenue plans can be put in place and achieved successfully and with greater profit moving forward. So having the entire team on board and looking at it from different perspectives can help to build a more successful strategy, and will also hopefully engage the staff and help with that retention and motivation of the team when staffing is so difficult at the moment.
I love the guess the revenue for the month game. I think that's one of my favourite. No one has any idea. It's never usually the revenue manager that wins either, so. Excellent, thank you so much. Please give a big round of applause for the esteemed panel. Kia ora.